Yeah.
Hello, can you hear us?
Hello.
Hello.
Hang on, I'm going to put you on the speaker because I started. Are you there? Is that Dustin?
Yes, this is me.
I'll put you on the. I'll put you on that speaker because I started to eat a raw carrot, and it's making a lot of noise here. So just excuse me for about 30 seconds. I just need to get rid of it. Okay.
All right, take your time.
I'm feeling that I should eat something healthy, so I just ate 2 sticks of celery, and then I found a carrot. So, because I've just been in London all day, and and I've had like chocolate and all kinds of weird falafels and stuff. So,
So you're trying to balance it out now.
Whereabouts in the States are you guys?
Minnesota.
Oh, right. I've never been to Minnesota.
It's like northern, middle part of the country.
Yeah, I don't think I've been to Minnesota. I haven't been all over the States. I mean, I haven't really done any touring in the States as such. It's just like I've been done kind of visits and been here. And for the last about 5 years, I've been down into NAMM, down the NAMM Icon Jam in Anaheim, just outside Los Angeles. I love it in the States. I always get on really well there because everybody seems so. I don't know if it's me. I'm not sure. Everyone always seems so happy. And so normally when I'm over in the States, I come back smiling for about 2 weeks.
Wow.
What was the interest in you guys, getting in touch with me?
Oh, we're just Mungo Jerry fans and wanted to get you on the show here, play some of your music.
Oh, okay. Is it all the old stuff you're playing, or you got hold of any of the newer things?
We have some of the new stuff, but not a whole lot.
Oh, okay. Well, if you want to give, like, when we finish, when you get, you send me an email and I'll get you some stuff sent over.
Yeah, that would be great.
Stuff that's in the process. I don't know. I'm really kind of the music that I do really is really based on like the blues in a lot of respects. And when I recorded in the summertime, it just happened to be a song that I wrote as a repertoire for my band. Obviously, when it came to record it in the studio, it kind of turned out different to what I was playing it on stage. And I gave it that kind of a bit of a lilt, like with a Latin groove and the mouth percussion and all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't really representative of the sound of the things that I was doing in the live situation. I was playing songs that I'd written in the style of the music that I was playing, which was I did a lot of Lead Belly stuff, a lot of Woody Guthrie, and things that maybe Bob Dylan got a lot of his ideas from, I guess, because I think Bob Dylan was obviously influenced a lot by Woody Guthrie. So I was playing like rural blues, and what they call in England was skiffle, and kind of mixture of a combination like rural blues, jug band music, because jug band music was, I don't know if you know much about jug band music. Well, you should do if you live in the States, but down in the South, they also called it spasm music. And it's music they did in house parties because people didn't have money to buy instruments. So, like for the brass, they used kazoos or a comb and paper. They didn't have a double bass, so maybe they'd have a T-chest bass, or then play the bass by using the jug, earthenware jug, or a metal can that they used to put gasoline in. And they have maybe a beat-up guitar, and sometimes they found an old piano in the house, and that stuff like the Piccaninny Jug Band, and this sort of music. You ever watch the old early editions of Popeye? It's that kind of a music, but really not played on the real instruments.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't know why I'm telling you all this, because I'm doing an interview with you and you haven't asked me any questions. So I'm asking you the questions and telling you things.
We were just going to let you roll with it, but yeah.
Okay, well, if you want to ask me any questions, do so, and I'll have a go at answering them. And otherwise, I should just keep on rambling on,
Okay. Well, you started to touch on it a little bit, but can you explain to us how Mungo Jerry formed?
Well, I tell you, it evolved, from when I was about 11 years old, 10 years old, I had a guitar, and I obviously was trying to play the stuff that was popular at the time, which was the beginning of rock and roll. And it was like, I was listening to early Elvis, Fats Domino, Little Richard, Jerry Lewis. I think, because from my cousin's record collection, I guess. And there was a guy in England called Lonnie Donegan, and he was playing skiffle, and his music was based on Buddy Guthrie, Left Belly, and all that kind of stuff. And he did a bit of gospel stuff, and he had a very big hit, and I think he went to number 1 in America. It's called Rock On and Rhyme. And before he died, he made an album with Van Morrison and some other guys, and they resurrected some of his stuff, and they did a version of Goodnight Irene and things like this. But anyway, I kind of got a band together by the time I was 14, and I was playing like hits of the day and anything that I liked, it was rock and roll. So basically, when I look back on what was influenced me, it was anything with a vibe and a groove. It wasn't necessarily the artist, and if it had a good feeling and a good melody and a good groove, then, you know, that's the sort of stuff that I played, and that's the kind of stuff that I listened to. I didn't set out to be a guitarist, really. I wanted to play the drums, but I lived in a very, very small house, and obviously drums couldn't fit in. And if I was singing, it was never thought that my mother said that I sounded like a foghorn, so I never really kind of thought I was going to be a singer. But you know, you got to make some music, and you can't just sing and play the drums. So I started playing the guitar, and then when I was about 15, I was playing in 14 in pubs and messing around. And I got a band together, and then it evolved. So eventually, the band it kind of changed from playing like rock and roll to blues, because obviously rock and roll comes from like the blues, and then I'd kind of discovered like the really early rock and roll, like the rockabilly stuff, and going back to like stuff like Jimmy Rogers and Hank Williams and that sort of country stuff, and the what do you want to call it, swing, cowboy music, and all. And I found that it was all kind of linked together. And then when the soul music thing came out, I got into that. I got into really the big like psychedelic rock thing. And all the literature and the lifestyle and everything that went around it, not necessarily all the drug side, but the philosophy behind like the psychedelia, and like reading stuff like Carlos Castaneda stuff, and all the periodicals that came out in the London area that were related to the psychedelic experience. And like in America, you got the Lovins and the Beings, and then you got like bands like the Grateful Dead and the Fugs and all that linked around. But then they all had the roots in the same thing as me, you know, in the same. They all came from the same, you know. But when it got down to it, like when the Dead did their country acoustic album, it's really good music. You never believed that what they were played later, that they had those kind of roots. So I guess when you trace back the musical roots of most of the iconic artists, it all hangs back into that kind of blues, rockabilly, early rock and roll kind of stuff, and then you get the link with the soul thing, and like James Brown and whatever. And for me, it's Marvin Gaye, Otis Redding, and I had a kind of whole kind of a big potpourri of musical influences, and then when I started playing rock and roll again. I was playing in this place in London called Middle Earth, and the bass player in my band, he left to join a guy called Bobby Parker, who had a hit with Watch Your Step. He came over from the States. And the drummer that just left, his name is Roger Earl. He's got a band called Foghat in the States. You know Foghat, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Roger was the drummer. And one day he came to me and said, "Hey, man, I just did an audition for a black guy that plays the guitar with his teeth," who happened to be Jimi Hendrix. But he didn't get the job. It was a toss of a coin. When I was talking to a guy, I was over in Seattle last September, and I was talking to a guy because Paul Betts, he was the co-founder of Microsoft with Bill Gates. He set up a rock and roll museum there and set all the guitars, and I was talking to him about Roger Earl. Apparently it's like a toss of a coin whether he got the job or it went to the other guy. And anyway, Roger ended up in Savoy Brown, so my band split up, and I had a gig to do, which at Oxford University in the December of 1968. And it was it was for the university. It was one of these big balls that they had in the universities, and there was a guy in there called he was the ex-drummer of John Mayall. I can't remember his name at the moment, and he was his new band, and then a guy called Mick Farron. He lives in the States now. He's a science fiction writer and stuff. And I got this gig. I thought, how are we going to play this gig? So I thought we're going to get £30. So the guy that I was working with, Roger, his name was Joe Rush. I was working in Timex Research Laboratory. He was into jazz music and skiffle and stuff, and we got a washboard who played the guitar, played some songs. Got Colin Earl to come along, who's Roger Earl's brother, playing the piano, and people liked the music, so we decided to try and do the gig playing this music with just a three-piece. And we all sat down. I sat down on the floor. We had no drummer. I used to stamp on the floor like Johnny Hooker, and all the college and all the students, they loved it. They went absolutely crazy, and they asked us to play again that night. And they turned the power off at about 5 o'clock in the morning, and we thought, we looked at each other and thought, well, we got something new here. So that was it. Started getting gigs playing that kind of music, and then another guy came along and joined the band, and that was it. We were called the Good Earth. And then old friend of mine, his name's Barry Murray. He was a booker for the Pink Floyd and Soft Machine and Tyrannosaurus Rex and the Pretty Things. He phoned me up one day and asked me what I was doing. I told him about this band that I was playing, and he came and had a listen, and he'd managed to get a job as a house producer at a record company in London. And he said, "Do you fancy making an album?" So we went there, recorded 17 titles. In the Summertime was one of them. It was released as the very first maxi single in the world. And the day after it was released, we got a gig at a festival in England called the Hollywood Festival with the Grateful Dead, Jose Feliciano, Black Sabbath, Ginger Baker, Traffic, Ozzy Osbourne, and all this kind of stuff. And we blew them all off stage. So got amazing publicity for the gig on the Saturday. And the organisers said, "Why don't you play again on the Sunday?" Which we did. The record was released on the Friday before, went straight into the charts at number 13. It was unbelievable. So then I asked my boss for some time off from work to do Top of the Pops in England, and then we went to number 1. But anyway, the band was, as I was saying, the band was called The Good Earth, and the record company and the management and everything, they said, "You'd have to change your name," and they pulled the name out of the hat, and that was it, Mungo Jerry, from T.S. Eliot's Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats.
Wow.
So, long story, you've got a good editing machine there.